You prove your expertise, you build a personal connection, and you deliver immediate value. I call that the trust trifecta. And it's the combination that turns someone from, I found this interesting podcast, to, I'm a subscriber and I recommend it to people. Your first 10 episodes are your audition. They're the portfolio, they're the handshake, and here's the problem. Most podcasters treat their first 10 episodes like warm-up episodes. Let me ask you a question. When someone discovers your podcast for the first time, what do they actually do? Because most people don't start at episode 1. That's not how podcast discovery works anymore. They find you through a short clip on TikTok or Instagram, or a friend texts them a link and says, you have to listen to this. Or they search a topic on Spotify and your show pops up somewhere in the results. So they land on, episode 34. They listen, they like it, and then they do something really important. They scroll back through your archive. They look at the titles. They look at how many episodes you've made. They scan the descriptions, and they're asking themselves one question. Is this a show worth my time? Is this a show that I want to commit to? And where do they look to answer that question? The beginning. Your first handful of episodes. That's where they go to understand who you are, what your show is really about, and whether you're the kind of person they want to keep listening to. Your first 10 episodes are your audition. They're the portfolio, they're the handshake, and here's the problem. Most podcasters treat their first 10 episodes like warm-up episodes, like practice rounds. Oh, I was just finding my feet. Those early ones aren't my best work. And I get it. I really, really do. But your listener doesn't know that those were your warm-up episodes. They just know that's what your show sounds like at the beginning. And if the beginning doesn't impress them, they leave. They don't make it to episode 34, where you really hit your stride. Today, I'm going to give you a framework for planning your first 10 episodes so they do specific jobs, not 10 random topics that felt interesting at the time. 10 episodes that are strategically designed to prove your expertise, build a personal connection, and deliver immediate value, all before your listener has had their second coffee with you. I'm Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. This is Smarter Podcasting. Let's build your foundation. So let me really hammer this point home before I give you the framework, because I think a lot of people hear your first 10 episodes matter and think, yeah, obviously everything matters. And then they move on and plan them the same way they'd plan any other 10 episodes, which is to say, randomly, if you're like me. But the first 10 are genuinely different, and here's why. First, when a new listener finds you through episode 47 and then likes what they hear, they scroll back to the beginning. I said this already, but I want to explain why it matters so much. They're not just checking out your early work, they're building a mental model of you. They're asking, is this person consistent? Do they know what they're talking about? Do I feel a connection? Is this show well thought out, or does it feel like they're making it up as they go? If they get to your first few episodes and they're unfocused or generic or clearly just you figuring out what the show is, they form an impression. And that first impression is, this show does not have a clear identity, which means it might not be worth my time. Second, most podcast growth happens through word of mouth. Someone tells a colleague, you have to listen to this show. That recommendation only happens when the show has a clear identity. People don't recommend shows they can't describe. They recommend shows they can sum up in just one sentence. It's the show about podcasting to grow your consulting business. If your first 10 episodes are all over the place, nobody can sum you up, which means nobody recommends you. And third, and this is the one that changed everything for me, your first 10 episodes set the trajectory for the entire show. The topics you choose, the format you establish, the depth you go to, All of that gets set in the first 10. If you set a strong trajectory, the show builds on itself. If you set a weak or random trajectory, the show drifts. I'll be honest with you, my first 10 episodes of Smarter Podcasting were not strategically planned. I just talked about whatever I found interesting that week. And they were fine. People listened, nobody complained, but they weren't doing a job. They weren't building toward anything. They were just content. If I could go back and do them again, knowing what I know now, I would approach them completely differently. I'd build them as a foundation that does specific jobs. 3 types of jobs, and that's what I'm going to teach you right now. This is how I think about the first 10 episodes of any show, and it's what we use when we plan shows for clients at 7 Million Bikes Podcasts. Every one of your first 10 episodes should fall into one of these categories: authority episodes, story episodes, and tactical episodes. Each type does a different job, and when you mix them in the right proportions, they create something really powerful. A listener who trusts you, feels connected to you, and has already gotten tangible value from your shows. That's the combination that turns casual listeners into loyal subscribers and eventually into clients. Let me break each one down. Type 1, authority episodes. You want 3 to 4 of these in your first 10. An authority episode is one that demonstrates depth. It shows the listener that you really, really know what you're talking about. And not in a look how smart I am way, in a I've spent years thinking about this and I can explain it clearly kind of way. These are the episodes that answer the biggest, most important questions your ideal listener has. The questions they're already asking themselves. The questions they'd pay money to have answered well. For a financial planning podcast, an authority episode might be these 5 things most people get wrong about retirement planning. That's a huge, important question that the right audience desperately wants answered by someone credible. For Smarter Podcasting, the episode you're listening to right now, Why 90% of Business Podcasts Fail, that's an authority episode. It's designed to demonstrate that I've thought deeply about this topic and I can teach you something genuinely useful. The test for a good authority episode is this. If your ideal listener heard the title, would they immediately think, I need to hear this person's take on that? If yes, you've got an authority episode. If they shrug and say, I've heard that topic covered 100 times, you need a sharper angle. Authority episodes are the ones that earn you respect. They're the foundation of your credibility. Type 2, story episodes. You want 2 to 3 of these in your first 10. A story episode is about connection. It's about showing the listener who you are as a person. Not just your credentials, not just your expertise. You, the human being behind the microphone. Because here's something I've learned after producing over 700 episodes across dozens of shows. People don't just follow experts. They follow people they feel they know. And they feel they know you when you share real stories. Not polished, everything worked out perfectly stories. Real stories with the messy bits included. For me, a story episode might be how I turned a pandemic job loss into a podcast business. And I don't tell that story like some inspirational TED talk where everything was planned and purposeful. I tell it honestly. I moved to Vietnam. I lost my job during COVID and I had no plan B. I started a podcast business because I didn't know what else to do. It grew mostly through stubbornness and a willingness to figure things out as I went. Now that's a real story. It's not polished, but when someone hears it, they feel like they know me. And when they feel like they know me, they trust me in a way they wouldn't if I only ever talked about frameworks and strategies. Your story episodes don't have to be dramatic. They don't need to be rags to riches. They need to be honest. Here's how I got here. Here's what I got wrong along the way. Here's what I learned. That's it. That's enough. Type 3, tactical episodes. You want 3 to 4 of these in your first 10. A tactical episode gives the listener something they can use immediately, not eventually. Not after they've listened to 10 more episodes, immediately. Today. This is the episode where you give them a framework, a process, a checklist, a set of specific steps they can take this week. Something that's actionable, something concrete, something that makes them pause the episode, grab a pen, and write something down. That is the gold standard. If your listener pauses to take notes, you've won. Because they got value from you before they've ever spent a single dollar with you. And that creates a kind of trust that no amount of authority positioning can replicate. For smarter podcasting, a tactical episode might be the 90-day launch plan for a business podcast. Step by step, week by week, here's exactly what to do and when. That's the kind of episode that someone finishes and immediately texts to a friend, I just listened to this episode and I've already written down 3 things I'm going to do this week. Tactical episodes are your most shareable content. They're the ones that spread. They are the entry point for a lot of your new listeners. So they need to be genuinely good, not surface level topics that anyone could Google. Real, specific, experience-based advice that makes someone think, this person clearly knows what they're doing. Those are the 3 types: authority, story, tactical. When you mix them across your first 10 episodes, you achieve 3 different things at once. You prove your expertise, you build a personal connection, and you deliver immediate value. I call that the trust trifecta. And it's the combination that turns someone from, I found this interesting podcast, to, I'm a subscriber and I recommend it to people. That transition is everything. That's where growth comes from. So now let me give you the actual template, because knowing the 3 types is great, but you need to know where to put them. Here's how I'd sequence the first 10 episodes of any business podcast. And I mean this literally. If you're planning a new show or if you have the chance to relaunch and replan, this is the order that I would use. Episode 1 and 2, authority episodes. Start strong. The very first thing your listener encounters should demonstrate that this show knows what it's talking about. These are your biggest, most important topics. The questions your ideal listener most desperately wants answered. You don't ease in, you don't warm up, you come out swinging with your best thinking. Episode 3, story episode. Now that you've proven that you're credible, let them meet you as a person. Who are you? Why are you the right person to be making this show? What's your journey? And be honest about the messy parts. Don't tell the LinkedIn version of your story. Tell the real version, the version where things went sideways and you figured it out anyway. That's the version people connect with. Episodes 4, 5, and 6, tactical episodes. 3 in a row. 3 episodes that give them something immediately useful. A framework, a checklist, a step-by-step process. Something they can apply this week. By the time they've heard these 3, they should be thinking, I've already gotten so much from this show and I haven't paid anything. That feeling is what builds the relationship. Episode 7, authority episode. Go deep again. By now, the listener has a sense of what you teach. This episode goes deeper on a topic that they care about. Show them a different dimension of your expertise. Episode 8, story episode. But not your story this time. A client story, or a failure that you taught something important, something that shows you've been in the trenches, not just theorizing from the sidelines. These third-party stories are incredibly powerful because they give the listener proof that your ideas actually work in the real world. Episodes 9 and 10, a mix of tactical and authority. By now the listener knows your voice, knows your perspective, trusts your expertise, and feels a personal connection. These 2 final episodes should feel like a natural continuation. Like the conversation is just getting started. That's 10 episodes, each one doing a specific job, not 10 random conversations about things that felt interesting that week. And the beauty of this framework is that it applies whether you're launching a brand new show or rethinking an existing one. If you've got a podcast that's been running for a while and the first 10 episodes are all over the place, there's nothing stopping you from re-recording them, or at least planning a season 2 that uses this structure. Your back catalog doesn't have to stay the way it is. Here's your homework for this week. And I know I keep giving you homework, but honestly, this stuff only works if you do it. Sit down and plan your first 10 episodes using this 3-type framework: authority, story, tactical. Follow the sequence I just gave you, write out the 10 episode titles. For each one, write a single sentence describing the core teaching or story. That's it. This should take you less than an hour, maybe 2. And I'm telling you, it will completely change the trajectory of your show. Because instead of launching with whatever you feel like recording, you're launching with a strategy, a plan that builds trust systematically. That's 3 episodes. The 3 elements that make a business podcast work, how to define your target audience, and now the framework for your first 10 episodes. If you've been doing the homework, you already have more clarity than 95% of podcasters. Next, we're shifting into content strategy and distribution. This is the stuff I get really, really excited about. Then we're talking about podcast SEO, how to get found on Spotify, Apple, and Google without paying for any ads. It's one of the most underused strategies in podcasting, and I'm going to give you the exact formula that we use. After that is the content repurposing system, how one recording becomes 10 plus pieces of content, and then how short form and long form content work together. Follow Smarter Podcasting so you don't miss any of it. And share this week's episode with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to chat, 7millionbikes.com, you can book a discovery call, and I'm always happy to talk to you about how we can work together. I'm Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. Cheers.